Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm your host and friend, Lisa Mason Ziegler of the Gardener's Workshop, and really glad you've decided to join me here again today because, I appreciate each and every listener, and I thank you so much for sharing it with your friends, those that you feel like might benefit from, hearing some of the experiences and wisdom that we share here on this podcast. So thank you so very, very much. So friends, I'm really glad to welcome back Amelia Ihlo of Rooted Farmers, who has been a past guest. And I'm really excited to talk about this subject today. Hi, Amelia.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Hey, it is my pleasure. And I just feel like so fortunate to have connected with you and to be able to bring you to so many beginner, budding, and seasoned flower farmers in all that you are offering here. So friends, before we dive in, so let's first, for those of you that do not know Amelia is the owner and founder of Rooted Farmers, which is an online marketplace of connecting flower sellers, flower farmers, and buyers online. And it's just a tremendous opportunity and business. And because of her experience, and Amelia is a flower farmer too, y'all. That's how this all kind of started. So she then founded Rooted Farmers, and that has put her into a seat that not only was she a part of a collective when she began her flower farming career, but then Rooted Farmers also works with collectives all across the nation. And you can find, there's a page actually on her website, rootedfarmers.com/collectives, that has a little bit there of what they kind of look at, offer to people looking to work with them. But all of this has made Amelia an incredible resource of information, experience, wisdom, what to do, and most importantly, what not to do, sometimes in working with a collective or perhaps considering starting. So all of this has led me for the Gardener's Workshop to be very honored to now be publishing an online course that Amelia has created called Collectives 101. And she's going to tell us more about that. But I just want to say, friends, if you're a follower, you know that I've been tooting the horn of collectives selling for a long time. And y'all, it is getting ready to really hit the ground running as more and more experience is being shared. And that's what this is all about. So Amelia, share with us, first off, tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be here, and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, so I am a flower farmer. I started farming in 2017, and we live in rural New Hampshire. We're in zone 4B, so we have long winters. And I, in 2018, 2019, started a collective, just started as an informal group here. We are in the Vermont, New Hampshire area, and we sell down into the Boston market, which is about 2 hours south of us. And so that was sort of the, where we got started as Rooted, was that we were trying to solve problems that really revolved around communication and aggregation for our group of growers with the group of buyers who we were working with. And so we had been working on an availability list basis, and we were really struggling. I mean, it meant, very, very long hours. I had a full-time job at the time, and just was not, it was just, 3:00 in the morning, we were up, making invoices, things like that. And so that was how Rooted was born, was we said, let's, what if we built something like Etsy, but for flower farmers instead of crafters? And we were able to let every farmer go in, upload all of their inventory, and then all of the buyers would hop in and they would see an aggregated list across our entire collective of all the product that I personally did not have to upload myself anymore. And it worked really well. And it solved our problem.
It seems so simple, right? But until you've been there, oh my gosh, that must have been a magical moment when all this kind of came to pass.
It really was. It really was. And what we found was that, when we first launched, our buyers doubled what they were spending previously using the availability list system. And when we went out and asked for feedback and we said, why did you do this? What happened? Their response was just that we had already communicated everything effectively in exactly the ways that they needed it communicated. And because we solved these communication problems, they were willing to spend more money. And we thought, well, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
That's this. If we can do this for our group, why can't we do this? These are problems that growers all across the country are struggling with. So why don't we bring these tools out to everybody? So that was how Rooted got started. We're going into our 4th production season now, and we're operating well outside of our northern New England original space here. And now we're coast to coast, and we've got growers in Maine and out to Alaska and everywhere in between. So that's a little bit about my background and about what we do at Rooted.
Thank you, Amelia, because I love listen. I've heard you. I mean, I've listened to you on other podcasts, and I think because while this may not be a new model to you, I think that this is really news to a lot of people of this model, not necessarily Rooted. Rooted took this model from a collective that you all created and then just took it 10 levels up by making it available to everybody. And, your experience with all of that, that's what's just so golden about all of this. So Amelia, out of the gate. So this is about, am I ready to join or start a collective is kind of what I wanted to address. And so I think first we ought to touch on, what does it take to be successful? What are those good red flags that you see to follow that path to success?
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of layers to that question, and there are a lot of different directions we could go with that. But I think the overarching thing that I would say is you have to be open to feedback. You have to be open to learning. You have to be open to, understanding where you're getting it right and where you're not getting it right. And you need to work on improving. And I think that's probably just general business advice, but it's so critical when you're stepping into a group, a business that is the collaboration of many businesses, right? You've got a lot of different businesses that are being aggregated through this model on the grower side, and a lot of different businesses that are kind of trying to connect with you on the buyer side. And so it's really understanding that you are one of these pillars in this model, and there are a lot of others, and you really need to be committed to strong communication and feedback and team building and being a team player in this model in particular. And I think without that, I think it's that would be a red flag that we'd look at if you weren't committed to that. If that didn't feel like a comfortable space for you to step into a team like that, then probably, a collective is just a different model that maybe doesn't suit your business right now. But as long as you're in that mindset of, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to continue improving, I want to build my network, I want to build my toolkit, for myself and my own business and my own farm. I think that is the number one thing that we look for in collectives as sort of an indicator for success.
Okay, perfect. So first, I want to look at two different sides to this conversation. I want to kind of speak to those folks that are considering starting a collective, perhaps, and then we'll talk a little bit more about joining a collective. So what is that process like? I mean, what is that rabbit hole you need to go down if that's kind of percolating up for you to start a collective?
To start a collective, I think the first question really is around your market. You want to make sure, if your goal is to pull together a group of growers to sell into a market, you want to make sure that you actually have a market that will support that sort of supply. If you're trying to build a collective and you only have 3 florists who are going to be able to buy from you, that probably isn't the right market. That probably isn't the right space. But if you're really honest about looking at your market, looking at, where can you distribute your product, where can you move your product, I think that's the very first step of the collective. And then on the flip side, because you're building a network here, you want to make sure you've got the buyer side of the network. So what does that market look like? And then you want to make sure you have the grower side of that network. And do you have people around you, growers around you? And it doesn't have to be right next door. I think our growers were probably 45 minutes or an hour away from some of our growers. And you can find creative ways to make that work from a geography perspective. But generally, within an hour of you, do you have other growers who are struggling with these same problems, who are interested in building this sort of model? And that potential for a network is the first layer that you need to really start exploring in order to start a collective. Is, do you have the potential for a network on the buyer side? And do you have the potential for a network on the grower side?
Starting a collective, I'm just sitting here thinking, so I feel like I've secured those 2 things. I live in the second largest urban area in the state of Virginia, which explains why we've just had no problem selling flowers, right? You know what I mean? There's just a lot of partying going on down here in southeastern Virginia. So just to kind of give a little snapshot, so you do feel like, okay, I would feel like, yeah, there's definitely buyers here. There are other growers. Then what is kind of some of the other indicators to move forward to the next step? I mean, I know you can't give us details, but just to give an idea of what that would kind of look like.
I think, I think understanding where, so if you're bringing together a group of people to do this, you need to figure out a model that will work for you. And sometimes you just want to explore, and you want to, sort of try out before you make a commitment to a legal structure. So a cooperative, for example, you're going to have legal expenses that are different from if you're just starting an LLC or a DBA out of your existing farm. So thinking about the model. And really understanding, is this a group ownership model? Is this I'm doing the bulk of the work myself, and so I own this business and I'm moving this forward independently? There are some business structure questions that you're gonna want to ask yourselves. Importantly, we don't get into a lot of that in the course, and that's very intentional. And that's because you really have to understand your local state rules and options in order to effectively evaluate that sort of decision. So the way that they do it here in New Hampshire is very different from how it's done in Pennsylvania or Virginia or Washington State. And so this is not a topic that we go really deeply into.
Right.
We give you a few resources, but it is an important question for you to be asking yourselves in those early days is, what is the right long-term solution for us? And maybe you don't know the answer to that. And so if you don't know the answer to that, what's the right short-term solution? And maybe it's just a DBA that you're kind of working through with your farm. Now, how do you build the resources is the next step. There is how do you find the people to do all the things that you need to do? And, I think we really look in groups that we're working with for places where you have a little bit of redundancy there. So not just one person doing all the things, but you've got a few people who are able to sort of shoulder that together. So looking at your network on the grower side, or it could be on the buyer side, who are the folks who are really motivated and excited to do this, who are willing to do a little bit of the groundwork, I think is the next sort of important question.
Several things have just come to mind while you were saying that. First off, I think particularly because, we do have so many wonderful new coming up growers, is that this is like it is starting a whole nother business. So I think for me personally, I would think to have at a minimum of someone in the group at the start that is an experienced, successful business person to help get this yet other business up and running, right? I mean, it is just overwhelming to start a flower farming business, much less to think about this whole separate entity that you're going to have maintained. And, so that experience level, while not everybody has to be a seasoned flower farmer, but there definitely needs to be a presence. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, for again, kind of staging the way to be successful?
I totally agree. I think there is always room for newer growers in collectives, and there's always a need to continue kind of growing that pipeline of farmers who are going to be able to supply. But in those early days, having somebody who really understands the farming side and really understands the buying side at the core of that decision-making team is absolutely critical.
Yes.
If you are building a business and you're, this collective, and you are selling into the florist market, and you're trying to bring together a lot of florists, and you're doing all of that, and you've never worked with a florist before, there is a really steep learning curve there. There's a really steep learning curve. And we do talk a lot about this in the course. And so we do help you kind of level up a little bit there. But there is no substitute for having a little bit of experience there. So, I think starting a collective with somebody who really is well-versed on both sides of that, both the growing side and understands, what does it take to grow really great product, but also what are designers looking for? What are they looking for in stage of harvest? What are they looking for in terms of scheduling? What are they looking for in terms of standardization? And having a baseline there with an experienced grower at the core of that decision-making team is really, really important.
The thought process of, the best way to learn how to flower farm is to go to work on a flower farm, for a year at least. I mean, it's such an eye-opening experience, and not everybody is going to have that opportunity to perhaps join a collective before. Maybe it would be great to join a collective that might be a little further than you might want to drive, with the thought, hey, this is me intel gathering, getting some boots on the ground. I agree with you that experience cannot be replaced by anything. No course, no book, no nothing, because you do not know what you do not know.
Yeah.
I mean, I experience that every single day, it seems like, in business. It's like, who would have known that? I mean, we are still tweaking and turning, and it's been 2.5 decades.
And I think related to that is you've got to check your ego at the door.
Yes.
I think it's because you don't know what you don't know, you really need to step into these relationships with humility and just really understanding there are layers of this business that will definitely be new to you. And you need to be clear about that with your buyers and clear about that with your growers, and also ask for feedback, because that feedback is, I think Carla has said this a lot, who is our director of marketing at Rooted. Feedback is such a gift. It is such a gift to your business to be receiving that kind of, insight into what your buyers are looking for and what your growers are looking for. And so, but with an ego in that can make it difficult for you to really internalize that and process it. So I think that's the other piece of advice I would give is just remember to check your ego at the door.
And, so here's the Lisa way of saying that, complaints is really what feedback is. That's just a better way of saying it. And something that I try to drive home when I'm teaching people how to start their business and get it off the ground is that this is not personal. This is business. And if you have to repeat that to yourself, as I do occasionally every morning, it's like, and it's exactly what you're just saying. This is not a direct shot at you. And a great book that I've read, I don't know if we've ever talked about it before, is that a complaint is a gift. It is the gift, and that's the name of the book, by the way. And it is the gift of an opportunity, because I will tell you, there is so much. I mean, they're telling you what's wrong with your business most often, and people aren't very good at complaining. They get emotional, they get ugly, they get, I mean, and it hurts your feelings. I mean, it just becomes a battle of bawling, I mean, not literally crying all the time, but it's hurting each other. But the root of it is good stuff if we can just clear all that mess out of the way, right?
Yeah.
So that is a great, great tip. So let's just talk about for a moment. Now, we just talked a little bit about if you're thinking about starting a collective. What if you're thinking about joining a collective? So what are the questions that would come that you think of when a grower says, I want to start selling to a collective?
I think a lot of the questions that we hear from people who are thinking about it is, am I experienced enough to start selling into a collective? Do I have enough product to sell into a collective? And I think it's really helpful to have these conversations as a group with other growers. But I think generally what we see is that when you have groups of growers who are experienced and they have been doing it, stepping into that is such a blessing for your business, because you have the benefit of all of their collective knowledge. And you can use that as a resource. How do you really level up your own game? How do you really improve your own farm, your own harvesting practices, your own, kind of communication? What are your buyers actually looking for? And now you're thrust into, by joining a collective, even if you're a little bit green, even if you're newer to this, even if you haven't done a lot of selling into the florist channel or the event designer channel, which is quite different from farmers markets. If you're joining a group where other people do have that experience, you just have this pool of resources that you can learn from. And that's so invaluable. You will learn so much faster, and so many more lessons, so much more quickly than you would if you were just going it alone. So I think, that is what I would say about the experience. Yes, you definitely want to have some experience growing. You should not join a collective if it's your very first year putting a seed in the ground. You got to take a year to figure that out or more. But don't let, kind of this feeling of imposter syndrome color your confidence in stepping into this. I think it's, if you really are committed to quality, if you're really committed to improving your own production and operation, you need to give yourself a little bit of grace there. The imposter syndrome can really convince you that you're not ready for something that you very well are ready for. And everybody feels that, it's even if you are experienced, you feel that sort of nervousness stepping into something that feels a little bit higher pressure, a little bit, that the expectations are a little bit greater than they might be if you were just selling at a farm stand or, at a farmer's market where you're bringing whatever you bring. But I think that's what I would say on experience, is that you don't have to be, I've grown for 10 years and I've sold to florists for 6 years. And, I need all of these prerequisites before I can even think about joining a collective. It's a great place to learn. It really is.
So I want to just touch on something that I think that we can all benefit from, is that stage of harvest quality question, because that is really, I see so many images of buckets that are being delivered, not to a farmer's market. So let's just talk about that for just a moment. So farmer's market, you're selling to the end user, has no idea what typically the flowers look like. So the flowers need to be more in the open to opening stage, right? To kind of show their stuff. But when you're in this wholesale market, whether you're selling to designers or florists or even supermarkets for that point, it's just a little bit different. And that's a real learning curve, I think, for people. And I think your comments about just the opportunity to learn from other experienced growers is priceless, right? I mean, isn't that I hate to keep using that word rooted, but isn't that the root of most of the problem? I mean, that's the root of customer complaints, and you never hear from that florist again. And it's because you delivered them old flowers in their eyes, which in farmers market's eyes, it was totally different, right?
Totally. There, when we talk a lot about this in the course is, who is your customer? How are they different from folks you may have worked with in the past? And what do you really need to know about stage of harvest and about, identifying when a flower has been pollinated? If something has been pollinated, it should not go out the door to your florist. It just shouldn't. If you've got sunflowers that clearly have been pollinated, you cannot give that to your florist. Unless they're very clear about what they're receiving, because they don't want that. If you're typically, and we talk a lot about the typical schedule that we see for collectives. Typically, if you've got to think about it on the buyer side. So if the buyer is designing for a Saturday or a Sunday event, but they're receiving your product on a Wednesday to Saturday is a period where your product has to last. And the likelihood of it lasting, if it was blown open in the field and pollinated and it's kind of passed already to Saturday or to Sunday, if you deliver it on Wednesday, is much, much lower than if you bring them something that is, the correct stage of harvest to actually sit in a cooler for a few days for them until they're ready to design with it on Friday. So it's really important to understand who you're selling into, like what is that channel and what are their needs? And then how do you back that up to, understanding per variety what the expectation is there. If your celosia is all open and, you can tell, and we actually have a side-by-side of celosia in the course, and you can look at across 3 different growers in the same collective, what is the buyer receiving? They get 3 different bunches of celosia from 3 different growers, and they think, as a buyer, they think they're getting the same thing, very different products.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be thinking about stem length. You got to be thinking about how you're processing. Are you stripping the stems? You got to be thinking about stage of harvest. So we go into all of this because it's really critical to delivering a consistent product to those designers to understand what are they expecting, what do they tend to get from a wholesaler for other products, but it colors what they're expecting from you also. And how do you meet those expectations?
So a couple things are jumping into my mind. First off, no, y'all, Amelia is not teaching you how to strip flowers and bunch flowers in this course. This is where having experience, when she says you need to deliver a bunch of flowers that are properly stripped, that's because you know what properly stripped is, right? I mean, that's that learning curve. And when you were saying that, it just reminded me so much. One of my biggest 20-year customers they just constantly bought more and more. The more I had, the more they bought every single week. And you want to know why it was? Because I can still remember him saying to me, I don't have to worry when I order from you. I don't have to think, oh my gosh, is it going to open? Oh my gosh, is it going to come dehydrated because it sat in a box somewhere? It's like I get to think about doing flowers instead of opening a box or even coming in a bucket from a wholesaler or through that retail process is what I call it. Because was the number one business building asset for me, was figuring out through experience, through the phone calls of those flowers you sent to me back when I didn't know what in the world I was doing. There is nothing to replace that. And, it's so simple, right? But it is huge, but people just don't focus on it enough. Proper stage to harvest. Yeah, I think that is an amazing piece particularly when you're still dealing with, you're not the one handing the flowers to the people for them to hand it right back to you and say, sorry, Charlie. Very, very important.
And I think something you just said, Lisa, that's really critical is one of the reasons that buyers love working with collectives is the trust. that they build with them as suppliers, because a buyer knows that there is security in place for them. If they get celosia from one of your growers that doesn't look good, they know that they can come back to you and say, oof, this, I can't use this. Here's why.
Right.
Can I get a substitute from some? And you've got other growers who are probably growing the same thing that you can substitute something, pretty identical, but better quality, or, something very similar that will work for their purposes. And it's because they develop that trust. When your buyer told you, I don't have to worry, what they were saying is, I trust you. I trust you as a supplier. I trust that when I get something from you, you either are going to always deliver something high quality, or you're going to stand behind it. And it's way easier to stand behind it when you're in a collective setting. And so I think that is, that's just something to really be mindful of in this group environment.
And, the other thing we spoke of earlier about, being humble and having, taking complaints. To learn, and I just had an experience like this. I was the one that was disappointed in something. The reaction of a professional when there is a problem really leaves a taste in your mouth for a really long time. My response has been, and this was not my response 25 years ago, friends. I had to learn this. My response, instead of saying, well, what's wrong with it? Or did you do this? Did you put it in the cooler and it wasn't supposed to go in the cooler? Or did you not put it in the cooler? Or did you? None of those should even be in your conversation. First thing out of my mouth is, I am so sorry. What can I do to fix it? You want a replacement or you want your money back? And then let's just say it's zinnias for some, strange reason, and you suspect they did put them in the cooler. That would just be a note on my invoice. Be sure, don't put these in the cooler.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? It's not time for correction and investigation during that process of building that relationship. And let me tell you, when you have that relationship, because that's what fueled, this is really just coming to pass in my mind right now. That is probably one of the key things that built my business, is people felt like they got good stuff from us. And when they didn't, I fixed it. They didn't have to feel bad about bringing it to my attention. They didn't have to. That's what you want to build as a business, is that kind of reputation.
And it's that reputation is exactly it, because it's the buyers are staking their reputation on your quality. Yeah. So their reputation out to their clients, what they are putting out there into the world, is only as good as the product that they're bringing into their arrangements. Right. And so if they're struggling, that's some of the emotion that's coming behind that feedback. If it does happen to, be a little bit colorful, is, that's their business reputation. All of it relies on, the quality of the product that they're putting into their design work. And so if they're coming to you with problems, you have to recognize, what does this mean to them? Don't just be very careful not to assume somebody's being difficult, because on their side, this is their business reputation, and it's nothing if they don't have really strong quality that's coming in, and really predictable quality, and a relationship that they can trust with their suppliers.
Great talk. So, Amelia, if you would tell us just a little bit about the course Collectives 101, about it, and what people can expect to learn from that course.
So, I think the course, we built the course with several of our collectives, and we've all been doing this for a number of years. And so we bring to it our, group experience and all the mistakes that we've all made along the way, so that you don't make all of those same mistakes. Hopefully, you're able to step into this with, understanding what is our group experience, and how can I use that to inform my decision to start a collective or to join a collective. Where can we help you avoid some of those big mistakes? I think this is a course that is really great if you are thinking about joining a collective this year. Maybe you're already committed to joining a collective this year, but you really want to make sure that you're as prepared as possible for that experience. It's useful for folks who are starting a collective, certainly, and wanting to kind of gain some of our insights as growers and as collective admins. And it's also useful, I think, to anybody who's really maybe not ready yet to start a collective, but it's something you've been thinking about. Maybe you're not ready yet to join a collective, but you want to get to a place where you are ready. This is a set, like this is, add this to your toolkit, because this is helping you understand. We cover quality, we cover consistency, we cover stage of harvest. We, even stepping back, we talk about the scarcity mindset. We talk about the fragmentation of the industry and why collectives are so valuable to you as a grower. And how can you really work within an industry where local product really does represent the minority of product that's out there? And how do you grow your footprint? So we cover all of these things. I think we're really excited to get it out there in the world. I think it's a really useful course for a lot of different stages of growers. But that's sort of a summary of some of the topics that we go into there.
And I think also the unspoken underlying stream through the course is just helping people to recognize a different mindset. You know what I mean? Because we get so caught up, right, in the growing and all of that part of it. It's like the afterthought is the business side of things and all these things that we've spoken of today, like how to take feedback, how to make use. I mean, feedback is like a free marketing analysis of your business most often. Even though, as we've mentioned, it isn't always presented in the way that, is the best, clearest way to know that. So Amelia, we're really proud to be partnering with you on this course. And we're really looking forward to it because, as I will say again and again and again, I just think that collectives are a major player in the future of the domestic local flower scene. And it's just really a useful model. And we just all need help. And we appreciate you sharing your experiences and wisdoms and firsthand dealing with those things. So friends, we just want to keep this conversation going. And so if you want to learn more about Amelia's course, there'll be a link below in the show notes below. And as always, if you review our podcast and share it with your friends, that's what feeds us to keep coming back and bringing you more and more great information from folks that are doing it, right? Practical, firsthand experiences. And so friends, until we meet again, thank you, Amelia, so very, very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
And till we meet again, friends, ciao.